Welcome, everybody. You're hearing the voice of Cindy Gordon, and we're on our second session of Incredible Men and Women Having Courage. Debbie McGrath and I are your hosts today, and we're delighted to have an incredible cadre of speakers. They'll each be introduced at their sessions, so we'll use our time wisely. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from everybody, but also hearing the voices of all of you that have joined us. I think most of you do know me, or you've had some experience. I'm Cindy Gordon, CEO of SalesChoice, and I'm very passionate about diversity, inclusiveness, STEM. But I think these days I'm even more interested in keeping my friends, my family, my customers, my clients all connected and far more. I think we're all we've all become very acutely aware of the importance of being human, and particularly the kindness of being humans. And so as I find brave spirits in life that are kind and I think fit with my core values as I live my life, I want to make sure that you know all of them. So every time we have one of these sessions, these are very special people that are role model in making our world a better place. I'm not going to spend too much time on our company. I think today's really more about community, but there's a couple of key points I do want to mention to you. Is that we have announced a new sales leadership network that's in emergence. It's SLN, you'll see it in the slides, and that's really about connecting chief revenue officers and sales leaders to really have conversations, not just about only revenue and ending revenue uncertainty, but more also about how to be far more authentic, how to ensure they bring their real voice to work, and how do they really ensure that they bring the best out in their people. We're fortunate we've got Siobhan Thatcher. You'll hear more from her, but Siobhan's an incredible role model of knowing how to find the magic in people and building practices and values to inspire people to create and give more. I thought I'd start with a little brief quote. I went through a few quotes, but I like this one because it said, if we're not a little bit uncomfortable every day, we're not growing. And when I step back and look over my career and the accomplishments, and I also look at diversity and inclusiveness, I know that we have far more to do. And I think what we've seen certainly in the last 12 months, we have to move the bar, and it's not going to come just from these conversations. It's coming from influencing all the circles to move, our world ahead in ways that, we can solve crises like we're going through right now in record-keeping time. And I think we've seen where countries have come together. We've seen where nations have also moved into their own parochial views in terms of how vaccines are being disseminated, etc. And, I think this is going to be an incredible case study about how do we create borderless worlds where the supply chains flow rather than just all moving into our own little spin wheels. Today, we're very fortunate Debbie McGrath is our host. I'll let Debbie say a few words about herself in a couple of minutes. We have a pretty packed agenda. We're going to start with Margie, and I'll introduce her in a few minutes. Then we're going to move to Siobhan. I'll introduce her as well, and Siobhan's going to be speaking about what do you see. And then we're going to move to Deborah Rosati with her distinguished panelists that she has, and then I'll have some very brief comments at the end. But we're going to try and stay in the envelope as outlined. I do want to mention to mark your calendars. We do want to do these once a quarter. We had good feedback on the last session. So May 18th, 2 to 4 is the next one. We're fortunate that my good friend Roger Lava was on a call with him today. Roger's in LA. He's the top vocal coach in America. And, if you know, he's the voice coach behind Bradley Cooper in the movie with Lady Gaga, also with Jeff Bridges, if you remember Reese Witherspoon in the famous Johnny Cash movie. But he's moved mainstream in helping CEOs around the world, helping executive leadership teams. We don't spend a lot of time rehearsing our voices. And the more I get into the research on the voice, I realize we're probably not using our most powerful instrument, because that's where emotion comes from. So you'll definitely want to be here on May 18th, to hear Roger. So let me turn things over to Debbie. She's going to say a few words about hr.com and also a few little Zoom tips. So I'll just say a couple things about Debbie. I've known Debbie, gosh, for probably 30 years. Before, you know, I think, yeah, we just had little babies. They were really small. And, you know, she's just done so well with her leadership across North America. And, you know, I just really appreciate the time. We were just chatting. She's up skiing in Whistler with a girlfriend for a month. And, you know, it's always interesting to see how Debbie brings business and life and also enjoyment as well. So Debbie, over to you.
Hi, thanks everyone. We support about 1.9 million HR professionals globally, doing a lot of education, community gathering, content, career pathing for those people. And as Cindy's known me forever, obviously she needs an updated photo because I have my COVID gray hair, but really happy to support you here in Zoom. We are going to be sending you guys out to breakout sessions. We are recording this. If you have any questions, please use the chat or the Q&A button, and Cindy and I will get to those as we go through it. Really happy to have you all here. Thank you.
So there's a few tips on using Zoom. I think most of us know what they are, but please mute your audio. If you want to use your chat, please do. We'll keep a mindful look at what's going on in the chat channel. And then specific questions, feel free to let us know. We're going to try and have questions as an open group, but a lot of the dialogue might be in your networking rooms. So first, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Margie Warrell. Margie and I sit on a board together, a board advisory group with Forbes Business and Technology School, and that's where I first met her. And she's just an inspiration. She has written so many books that are bestsellers. The titles, I think, will give you context on Margie and how she thinks. Titles like Stop Playing Safe, You've Got This, Live Brave, Finding Your Courage. She's an international speaker. She just returned from Singapore to the States. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to turn everything over to Margie. Welcome to North America.
Thank you, Cindy, and hello everybody. It's great to be with you all today. Yes, I've literally just moved into a house yesterday, and last night was my first night with my bags unpacked, having moved from Singapore, where I've been living the last 4 years, back to the United States. So it's great to be back. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about yes, leadership, but in particular, how we can advance and embolden more women to get to top tables. And Cindy, I'm guessing in terms of the slides, you're able to just click down and maybe just put the whole lot down, and I'll just speak to them as we go along. So I know that I don't need to convince any of you that diverse teams make better decisions. And yet, despite all of the efforts we've put into creating more diverse, inclusive organizations over the last couple of decades, there's still a huge paucity of women sitting at the top tables. So this is actually an area that I've had a lot of passion around for a long time. I grew up, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the deep, deep South, down under, and I grew up down there on a small dairy farm in rural Australia. I had pretty much zero powerful women role models growing up. The only women I could think of were Margaret Thatcher, and in terms of women that seem to hold themselves in their power. And so I know for me how much living in a very gendered, being raised in a very gendered environment impacted how I saw myself as a leader, even my own ambitions. And the research shows that that's actually still a large issue for women, obviously less so today than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. But it's still, when our mental template for what power looks like, for what leadership looks like, is still innately masculine. And I run a lot of inclusive leadership programs focused on helping leaders to be braver and create cultures of courage in their organizations. And when I ask people, think of a leader, you know, 90% of the time, most people in the room, at least 50%, if not 60, 70%, will think of a man when they think of a leader. And so there's that saying that we cannot be what we cannot see, and hence why having more women sitting in top tables makes a really big impact for younger women as they look up and go, well, what's possible for me? And hence why it's awesome that we now have our first Madam Vice President here in the United States. So what are the reasons why we have so few women? Of course, there's a lot of external barriers, and there's obviously a lot of overlap between the external systemic barriers and the biases, but also women themselves can often internalize a lot of gender biases in how women see themselves, in terms of their ability to wield power, in terms of you know, how they should act and how they should connect, how they should communicate. And I'm delighted to see that Roger will be speaking at the next one of these, because Roger is a master at helping men and women find their authentic voice and speak with a clarity and authority and presence. But women, I think, struggle with that more so than men. And I don't know about you, but just from one example is when people will give me a compliment or flattery, I often find myself almost rejecting it or dismissing it or diminishing it, going, oh no, thanks, but I wasn't that good at this, or I could have done better at that. And so often we talk ourselves down and we don't speak powerfully. The way we describe ourselves, the way we attribute our success, the way we connect with others, women often apologize before they express an opinion. In fact, we know that women are 4 times more likely to preface an opinion with an apology. So I know I don't know that much about this, and there certainly could be more people here that understand this better than me. And look, I totally get it wrong and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but maybe. And so by the time we actually get our opinion out of our mouths, we've lost our audience, and we've really undermined our own authority and the value that our opinion has to bring. And so a lot of my work is about how do we help women to really step into their power more fully and embolden them to really make the difference their difference makes. So I'm just going to just share with you here a few things that women can do, and I absolutely want to take all of your questions later on. That's not to say that that's things that men can do too. We absolutely need to have male champions, but I believe it's really important to empower women as individuals themselves, because we know that there's double binds. You've probably heard of the backlash effect. You know, women react with the same assertiveness as a man and we get called bossy or bitchy, whereas a man just gets called being assertive. So there are absolutely double binds, that likability, competence double bind. You know, she can be competent but not likable, or likable and not competent. Men don't have to conform into such a narrow band of behaviours, but we cannot change restrictive gendered norms by conforming to them. We have to be willing to sometimes push the envelope on what is seen as acceptable female behaviour in order to reshape and dismantle so many of those think manager, think male gendered norms. So what can we do? One up is career risks. In my doctoral research that I just completed last year, what we found was that men are more willing to put themselves out there, to put their hand up for roles before they feel ready. I remember sitting on a panel a few years ago, and I was sitting there with the CEO of a bank, and he said, you know, throughout my career, I just had to look at the job title and I would throw my hat in the ring. Whereas women want to have not only just be able to tick every box, but be able to tick every box with a really big tick. And so often we're less willing to put our hand up, take a leap towards roles. Often also less willing to move with a role or do something in a different area than men, who frankly are more willing to wing it. Even when they don't have the competence, they're more willing to figure out how to fly the plane as they go. So that's a big one. Secondly, embracing feminine leadership traits.
Including me.
Well, there you go. So obviously this isn't just for women, but and I know it applies to men too. So thank you for sharing that. But when I'm talking here, I'm totally generalizing. And these are some of the things we all need to do more of, male and female. But the tendencies tend to be women, when it comes to embracing just those caretaker traits. We've seen through this COVID pandemic that countries who have been governed by women have generally responded better than those who have been governed by men. And part of that is women are just naturally very empathetic and have a tendency to being able to be better able to put themselves in the shoes of others, looking out for how do we take care of people versus just taking care of the bottom line. And I think when we think about ourselves and look at ourselves as leaders, often we go, well, I don't look like that and I don't act like that. Maybe I'm not leader-like. And yet we know that the strengths, those natural feminine qualities that are brought to the table, compassion, empathy, a collaborative spirit, an ability to build bridges, they are more essential than ever. And so for men and women, obviously, particularly through this time that we've been dealing with incredible uncertainty and disruption, that leaders who are able to really tune in to the pulse, the emotional landscape of their organization, are able to shepherd their people through the storm, captain their people through the storm, mixed metaphors there, better than those who aren't. And I know I wrote a Forbes column on this a while back about just the importance of empathy and being compassionate and tuning in to not just what other people are thinking, but to how other people are feeling. And so really important for all of us to continually be putting ourselves in the shoes of those with whom we want to influence, and looking at, well, you know, how is it that they see it? How are they feeling? What's going on for them? Tuning into what's going on, the unspoken concerns. And obviously, not all women are great at doing that, and not all men are bad at it, but it's certainly a strength that women bring. And in line with that, I spoke a moment ago about being willing to defy the norms and to risk backlash. And a few years ago, Sheryl Sandberg launched an initiative called Ban Bossy. And Beyonce got behind it. It was a really cool video about we need to ban bossy. But I actually disagree with that approach, that strategy where women are judged more harshly for being feminine, for exhibiting assertiveness. I think we don't need to ban it. I think we really have to embrace the word. If people are going to say they're bossy, it's like, you know what, none of us want to be bossed around. But we need to risk being called bossy from time to time. And that doesn't mean we're not taking care of the interests of other people, but we have to be willing to assert ourselves, even if that may sometimes ruffle some feathers and run that risk of backlash. Building authority through using power language. And I spoke a minute ago about the importance of speaking powerfully, of really standing tall. Here I am bending over, but standing tall in our own power, holding ourselves as we would if we felt that we were unstoppable and absolutely worthy of all the success that we want and whatever position we're in. And I'm curious to know here, I don't know if any of you have ever had to deal or ever struggled with the imposter syndrome. I'd be curious if you put your hand up on that one. A few of you, not a lot of you. Okay, a few of you. Certainly that's something that a lot of men and women can experience it, but women tend to more so than men. And that's often because we feel women find it harder to internalize their strengths, and hence that tendency to talk ourselves down, that tendency of women to preface their opinion with an apology or something that minimizes the chance of ruffling feathers. And so I just being mindful even of where we can sometimes use that in our language. And a really interesting one that I found also in my research was that how important it is for women not to be perceived as playing the gender card. So I interviewed a lot of very senior female and male leaders, but it's interesting, the most senior female leaders said, look, it's absolutely important that we celebrate women's strengths, we promote, we make sure women are getting the leadership skills they need to get in order to be positioned for very senior positions. However, we have to avoid that, obviously, the perceptions of tokenism, and women who are playing the gender card, it generally works against them and all women. And I thought that was a really interesting finding that came out of the data. And finally, our networks. Men generally are better at establishing very diverse networks and building relationships with people who they might not necessarily share a common value set or share common interest, but because they're trying to just build their networks because that's helping them in their career, their business, etc. Women tend to develop relationships, often more meaningful and authentic relationships, but more with women they see something more in common with, which means they often have less diverse networks than men. So really important to build out diverse networks. You might have heard of that concept, strong ties and weak ties. Well, often it's actually the weak ties, those people we know, we don't necessarily, we're not best friends with them, that actually can open up doors of opportunity. And of course, hand in hand with that is the importance of developing early relationships with sponsors and people who are in senior roles. Sponsorship, early sponsorship was found is a really critical factor for opening up the opportunities for women early in their career. And what the research shows is that women who don't get that sort of sponsorship support, someone connecting them in, putting their name forward, making introductions, in that first 5 to 10 years of their career, it often flatlines, and often they're the women who tend to join the ranks of those who will opt out versus stay in the pipeline on the ladder towards more senior roles as well. And so obviously this talk's been very female focused. I'm talking around, you know, I largely wanted to kind of share some of the research that I've been doing. But when it comes to courageous leadership from a larger umbrella, I think as we look toward the rest of 2021, obviously we still don't know exactly how the timing will unfold when it comes to moving forward. But what we do know is that the future that we're moving into, whatever the workplace is going to look like as people go back to work eventually, it won't be the same as what it was. There will be a lot more people that will be including into their work week a mix of remote work and a hybrid model. And I think for all of us who are in leadership roles in the HR space and really optimizing the potential of people in organizations, creating that environment where we can bring the best out in people and have a strong sense of clear purpose that rallies everybody behind that is going to make a big difference in helping us bounce forward. And on that, I'm not sure where time is, but I'm happy to sort of hand it over now, Cindy, and let you kind of lead it from here.
Thank you, Margie, very much for your comments and, you know, sharing your research and your inspiration and your energy. What I'd like to do now, if Debbie, we could move people into to Zoom groups, maybe 4 to 5 per group, and then bring them back in 10 minutes. And what I'd like you to do in your groups, and, you know, we'll have some closing comments from Margie, is just to discuss, you know, introduce yourselves and, you know, what inspires you in terms of daring to be braver. Maybe there's a leadership experience that you can share. But also one of our objectives to make sure that you network and you form some new relationships. So we've all been so inundated lately with, you know, I'd call it the demands that we have in our day-to-day lives. So I think it's a chance for you to some of the points that Margie said in terms of diversifying your network. So let's go to that Zoom network effect. Thanks,
Okay,
Debbie.
here we go.
Off we go. again to get the slides back up. Just here. Okay, so can you all see the slides again?
Yep.
So Margie, if you'd like to just do a few closing comments, I think everybody probably had some spirited dialogue, and maybe get a time check, and let's continue on. Margie, closing comments, Margie?
Yeah, I would just say that the biggest barrier in any organization in their own lives is fear. That's what stifles potential on every level. And I think right now, as fear dials right up and there's so much at stake, all of us have a role to play in really stepping up to the leadership plate in our spheres and acting with the courage that we would like to see more of in others. And I hope all of you will just embrace discomfort as you go through your working life and outside of it, and be a little bit braver than you might feel like being. If you do that every day, you'll do a lot more than if you let fear call the shots.
And Margie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspirational message. Just being in my little breakout team, obviously people are very curious about why. So we may need to come back in another session and do a deeper dive on what are the factors that create these behaviors that we need to all overcome. So thank you so much, Margie, and I'm so glad you're back in the US safe and sound.
Yeah, happy to join you again. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.